Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Fred Iseman.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's my honor to introduce our senior senator from New York, Chuck Schumer. If we're going to get a new Penn Station in New York City, it's not going to be done without Chuck's support. He has been fighting in the Senate for years for dollars to fund the new Moynihan Station. In addition to that, he is a champion of improved infrastructure for New York City, which we've just been talking about, and which he's going to address now. Chuck, after Hurricane Sandy, got $60 billion appropriated for this city. After 9/11, he got $20 billion appropriated for this city. We were just sitting in the green room now, and I was listening, not listening to the content, but just listening to hear him battle with somebody in the Senate on the telephone for something and win. And I was thinking, once again, this is somebody that you want in your corner. Just to give you a little background, Chuck was born in Brooklyn, and it's a good American story. Chuck's father was an exterminator, and he told me one night over dinner recently that he decided to do something that he loved, because on Sunday nights his father would pace the floor. He would hear his father pacing. His father hated what he did, and Chuck vowed that he would do something that he loved, and he does it with a passion. He went to Harvard Law School, and at 23 he was elected to the state Senate in his home district. At 29 he was elected to the U.S. Congress, and in 1998 he became a senator, where he was a leader. Well, as a congressman initially, but he was a leader in the fight against crime. And during his tenure in national government, he's seen the city's population increase from $7 to $8.5 million, much of that because of the reduction in crime. He cares deeply about the issues that matter to the city and that will make it continue to thrive. Those issues, among many others, are immigration, education, income growth, infrastructure, national security. I mean, no one knows more about the Iranian nuclear weapons program than Chuck. He, every year, because of his focus on infrastructure, makes sure to visit all 62 counties in New York State and see for himself what they need. So Chuck is intense, he's passionate, he's extremely intelligent, don't take him on an issue unless you're prepared to argue the fine points. I have, and I've lost. I'm proud to be his friend and to introduce him. Here he is, Chuck Schumer.
That's very nice. Thank you. Thank you, Fred. And first, I want to thank Fred for the great job he does. Our city is blessed with people who are successful, but somehow either the water or the air or something in New York says to them, you have to give back. That just relying on your success and enjoying your life is not enough. And they're not satisfied unless they not only do well, but they do good. And Fred is one of those people, as are so many of the people who are involved in the Municipal Art Society. And Fred, I thank you for being a great New Yorker and a great American. Thank you. Now, Fred mentioned that I visit every county every year. I always like to begin with a little story, so this is the one about those. How did that happen? Why did I visit every county every year? Well, when I ran in 1998 against Senator D'Amato, he played on the old upstate-downstate rivalry. And he said to the people upstate, a significant part of the vote in New York State, that if Schumer's elected, you'll never see him west of the Hudson. And so I countered by saying that I would visit, if I was elected, if I was lucky enough to be elected by the people, I would visit every county. I won, and sure enough, I started visiting the counties. I enjoyed it so that I did it every year subsequently. I've done it every year up to now, so I visited at least 15 times each county. Well, it paid off in my first re-election. In 2004, I won every county but one. The one county I didn't carry was Hamilton County. For those of you who know your New York State geography, it's a beautiful county in the middle of the Adirondacks. Great rivers and lakes and forests, just a beautiful place to hike or to camp. But it's our smallest county. It only has 5,000 people. So the day after the election, I was feeling pretty good about myself, and I say to my Chief of Staff, Martin Brennan, who always keeps me in my place. He's been with me since I started. I'm lucky he still is. I said, Martin, why do you think we won every county but Hamilton? Why did we lose Hamilton County? He said, well, it's easy, Chuck. I said, well, what do you mean? He said, well, you visited it 6 times, once a year. I said, yes. And it has only 5,000 people. I said, that's right. He said, it's the only county where you actually met every single voter. Anyway, it's great to be here. One other little story. So my father was an exterminator, hated his job. One of the great burdens in my life was watching this fine man just get eaten up by the job he hated, the little business he had. But my sister once, we always tried to have some humor about it in our family. My sister once sent him a Father's Day card that said, Dad, we're the only family that associates the smell of DDT with love. Because he'd come home smelling of all the chemicals. Anyway, it's great to be here, and I'm so eager and proud to address you about the subject of infrastructure. I not only want to thank Fred, but I want to thank Vince Cipolla, Eugene Birch, and Margaret Newman for the great job they do, the whole board, and all of you who make the Municipal Arts Society such a precious gem for all of New York. Now, like all of you, I'm passionate about investing in infrastructure. I know that our long-term economic outlook depends on the quality of our infrastructure. In many parts of New York City metropolitan area, we have our work cut out for us. Like you, I'm deeply concerned about building a city that works for everyone, a city that continues to grow, create opportunities, as equally for a kid who grew up in Brooklyn as for the family that arrived from just across the ocean. And to do that, we literally build and repair and renovate New York's infrastructure as a must. We have to meet the challenges of the 21st century. And that's going to take some creative policy solutions. We must start on this project today, for New York City's challenges are unique in terms of the scale. We are the largest city and far and away the largest commuter city. Manhattan is situated on a small island between 2 rivers, one of which is over a mile wide, and we can't let 3.5 million people get on and off Manhattan Island every day. That is an amazing feat. We can't lie to ourselves. We're also an old city. Our transportation infrastructure was built before some cities were even founded. And yes, we're rebuilding from one of the most devastating storms that did so much damage to our infrastructure and that hit the city in the past century. And as we're constantly reminded, the likelihood of it happening again is all too large with the changes that we have seen in climate. We've made a lot of progress over the last few years. Just last month, the Federal Transportation Administration released almost $2 billion in Sandy-related upgrades to New York's infrastructure, including almost $200 million for Staten Island ferries, $40 million for the development of Moynihan. And what's so good about the Sandy money is we wrote in provisions for resiliency. What does that mean? In the past, like with Hurricane Katrina, FEMA gave money only to replace what had been damaged or destroyed. We said, no, let's improve. Let's not require the municipalities, in this case New York City or Nassau, Suffolk counties, New Jersey, to simply rebuild. Let them build back better, and let's give particular emphasis to building back in a way that would protect us if, God forbid, a future Sandy occurred. And so about 1/3 of the entire Sandy infrastructure money is dedicated to resiliency and to green development that will protect us from the future. Those are some of the challenges we faced, and the Sandy aid is a model, rebuilding in a way that makes our system stronger and more resilient. And those are amazing. There are still amazing challenges to us. The harsh matter of the fact is federal investment in infrastructure, even with the Sandy money, which was huge, has not kept pace with demand. We need to radically increase the federal government's commitment to invest in infrastructure. Another thing that's happened, the rise of the Tea Party and the hard right has kiboshed the flow of federal support to infrastructure projects. These people are amazing. You know, America has believed in building highways since Henry Clay came up with the idea in the 1820s. Now, Henry wasn't a Republican. He was a Whig. That was the predecessor party to the Republicans. This is how old this is. And he came up with this idea, which was called internal improvements, that the federal government, to help our country grow, would build highways, roads, I guess then, over the Appalachian Mountains to open up America to what was then the far west, Ohio, Kentucky, Tennessee. It was a huge success. And bipartisan agreement that the federal government should help the localities with infrastructure existed until about 3 or 4 years ago, when these Tea Party folks came in, the same people who want to shut down the government, the same people who don't think that any federal help should go to help poorer families get to college, the same people who feel that NIH should not be funded, and they slashed the money for highways. Secondarily, we had another problem, sort of a result of success. When the automobile bailout occurred, because the auto industry was in such bad shape, we did a very smart thing. We said, okay, we're going to give you money, but you've got to make these cars far more energy efficient. And in fact, the federal mileage standards will go up to 55 miles a gallon by 2025. That means, first, we have a lot less CO2 going into our atmosphere. It's a great thing. It means that our geopolitics will change, because in 2025, when this happens, we will not need to import another barrel of oil. But it also means that we burn less gasoline, so the Highway Trust Fund, which has been fueled, if you will, by the 18.5-cent tax on each gallon of gasoline, is declining. So the combination of the Tea Party and the combination of the decline in the trust fund means we have to have creative solutions. And that fund, by the way, not only funded highways, but it funded mass transit. And my job, legacy of my predecessor and mentor, Senator Moynihan, was to make sure that New York did well in the Highway Trust Fund and the Mass Transit Trust Fund. We do. It's one of the few places where we get more money back. For every dollar we put in, we get about $1.18 back. We are a donee state. We're usually a donor state in most other areas. So let me give you two possibilities and then about a couple of projects we're working on here in New York. The first is something that happened. In 1999, when I became senator, and I love creating growth. New York City can't be static or we die. That's just who New York City is. And so it became apparent to me that the whole west side of Manhattan was sort of barren. Here we're jamming into the rest of it, but take from about 28th Street to 42nd Street, west of 8th Avenue, almost there was nothing there. And the reason was we're so dependent on mass transit. There was no highway, no subway. It ended at at Penn Station on 34th and 7th. And so what we proposed was something called a TIF. And what is a TIF? Here's what happened. I proposed, as part of a group that I headed called the Group of 35, that we build the subway line to 11th Avenue and that we pay for it by selling bonds, but having the revenue from the increased taxes, because those properties along the rail lines value would go way up, their assessments would go way up, their taxes would go up, and use those taxes to repay the bonds. And it wouldn't cost the city taxpayers a nickel, and everyone would benefit. Well, lo and behold, it worked. And the subway line is nearly finished. Mayor Bloomberg did a very good job here. In fact, we tried to get it finished in time so he and I could take the first subway ride on December 29th or whatever it was, before he left office. But it's about to be finished, and as you can see now, the far west side is beginning to blossom. Well, the TIF is an example of funding that we should use over and over again. We can use it for highways, we can use it for mass transit more particularly, and it can really work. Here's a second idea. So we have huge infrastructure needs, huge. And much of our infrastructure in New York, the Northeast, the Middle West is old. There's a huge amount of building after World War I and then after World War II, but that stuff is pretty old, 100 years in one case and 60 years in another. So how do we get the kind of massive dollars for infrastructure going? Well, one of the proposals that many of us like is something called an infrastructure bank. An infrastructure bank has equity in the bank. It can use that equity to borrow for lending, and projects that can pay back over a period of time get the loans to be built. So it won't work for a non-toll highway. We'll have to rely on the Highway Trust Fund for that. But as I said, the Highway Trust Fund is shrinking and the needs are growing. But if it's a bridge, if it's a tunnel, if it's a toll highway, if it's a water project, a sewer project, if it's new power lines to bring us, say, clean hydropower from Canada, or broadband to start wiring places that don't have it, both in rural and inner city New York, the infrastructure bank can fund those. And because it's done in a way where the bonds have to be repaid, a lot of the pork in this infrastructure goes away, because these projects that by definition are porky won't be able to pay back. So you need a nice amount of equity to get in there. Unfortunately, our little Tea Party friends will oppose that. And in the House of Representatives, at least in the next 2 years, the hope that they will not be in the majority is forlorn. In 2017, we'll have the majority and we'll be able to do a lot of other things, in my judgment, sorry for the political advertisement, under President Clinton. She'll do a great job. But that's just a judgment, not, I've already endorsed her, so it's not news. Anyway, but what do we do now? Well, there are lots of foreign companies that want to send their money, American international companies that have lots of money stuck overseas. They want to send it back, but they won't send it back at our 35% tax rate. And they're desperate to do something. And they have all our Republican friends clamoring to get something done. How about letting them send the money back, tax it not at 35, but at 8 or 9 or 10%, and put that money to fund the infrastructure bank? No tax dollars. Nothing out of the Highway Trust Fund. It will bring in somewhere between $60 and $80 billion the first year. You leverage that with the loans, it's about 8 to 1, close to 10 to 1, and you'll get about $800 billion of money nationally to build our desperately needed infrastructure. And it's the kind of thing that could pass. Democrats want an infrastructure bank. Republicans want repatriation. Marry them, and you might get something done. So there are creative solutions. Now, here are some of the things I'd like to use some of that money for. One is Moynihan Station. After years of dreaming and work, Moynihan Station is on the verge, the precipice of success. It's time we avail some money, and they only need about $200 million more to get the whole thing done. So there we could get money from FTA and Amtrak and elsewhere. The benefits to Midtown are clear. Phase 1 of construction, which is the underground stuff, and making Penn Station a lot easier, and anyone who has to use Penn Station to commute knows how much it needs to be upgraded. But that's getting close to being done, and now we'll go on to Phase 2. All of the players, the city, the state, the feds, the Amtrak, have to work together so we can get this Phase 2 done. Interestingly, as the real estate market has come back in Manhattan, we have a greater ability to leverage private sector dollars from the developing rights to the real estate near Moynihan. We could use some of those funds for complete construction on the rail improvements at Moynihan. Perhaps the point about Moynihan that the Municipal Art Society and this crowd will find most pertinent is that improvements at Penn Station, regardless of Madison Square Garden, is immediately dependent on completing Moynihan Station. And once Moynihan's complete, not only will the West Side get a grand new station that it deserves, but Amtrak will move out of Penn Station, creating much more space, habitable space, beautiful space, for the Long Island Railroad and the New Jersey Transit. It'll allow for upgrades in Penn to improve the passenger experience, increase capacity, keep New York growing. It's a great idea, and my goal is to try and get this done in the next short while. Since everyone here, since I urge everyone here to join me in keeping up the drumbeat, I urge everyone here to keep the drumbeat up for Moynihan. It's important. Another project we desperately need, Gateway. The Gateway project, for those of you who are unfamiliar, involves a total revamping of Amtrak's infrastructure near New Jersey and near New York City and Jersey City, replacing and expanding on our infrastructure to make it more resilient. You may remember, you've just read that those two tunnels under the Hudson were flooded during Sandy and are not going to last much longer, but also to increase capacity of Trans-Hudson Rail. Most importantly, would involve building new rail tunnels under the Hudson to replace the century-old tunnels we rely on. We are much closer than people realize to a calamitous situation where the Amtrak tunnels coming into New York City become inoperable before we have new tunnels in place. We did have the ARC that was ready to do it. And Governor Christie, in one of the worst transportation decisions in the last 100 years, pulled the money, even though the vast majority, 70%, was from the federal government. But we have to find a new way to do it. You can't get another train under the Hudson. Amtrak, which is growing. Amtrak service is better. Listen to this, you'll be amazed. 2/3 of all the people who travel in the Boston to Washington corridor, Boston, New York, Philadelphia, Baltimore, Washington, now go by rail rather than by plane or car, which is how it should be from both an environmental and an efficiency point of view. But now you can't get another train in that. You can't get another train even from Jersey Transit across the Hudson because the tunnels are old and narrow. So we have to do that. We have to build. We have to create this Gateway project, both because of the damage that the storm damage to the tunnels, and because we need to expand capacity so New York can grow. So the need is no longer in question. How do we pay for it? Well, we might be able to use a TIF, as I mentioned before. There's another source of funding. Who would have thought? Amtrak itself. The Northeast Corridor trains, if you ride on them, they're just always crowded, is hugely profitable. For the first time, Amtrak is making money, even though they have to pay for the trains that go from Fargo, North Dakota, you know, to Council Bluffs, is that in Iowa or Nebraska? Well, to Council Bluffs, and have no people on them. And so Amtrak is willing to chip in a significant amount of money to do the tunnel. So the combination of Amtrak and perhaps a TIF, we can really get something done there. It's really important. It'll be a combination of grants, loans, debt, private and federal-backed debt, to make sure that this happens. But we need to do it. It's essential to our city. Can we do it? Well, look at the Tappan Zee Bridge. They received the largest TIFIA loan in history. It's a little different than TIF, but it's a similar program. And that project is smaller in scope and scale than Gateway, so we have our work cut out for us, but it has to be done. So, there are ways we can creatively fund our infrastructure, and there are things we really need. We have to work together on those. And one final point, not quite related to infrastructure, but I thought I'd mention. As I mentioned to you, Senator Moynihan was my mentor. And he was a great man, great thinker, and someone I miss very much. He was actually my professor at college. And so I've known him a long time. I knew him a long time. he said something that always stuck with me. We should not be afraid to build grand public works. A long time ago we did. We seem to have shied away from it. It is worth the public expenditure to give us pride and strength in our municipality and localities to do it. Moynihan Station will be an example because it will be beautiful in his name. Whether you like the architecture or not, the Calatrava Station is another example. I don't know how many of you have gone down there and seen it, but it is a landmark for downtown that everyone will remember and be part of New York. And now that our city is prospering again, and now that there are creative ways to finance, we should certainly not turn away from building grand things again, like the grand old buildings, like Grand Central Station, that we know and love and revere. And I will do everything I can to push our municipalities, localities, and states in that direction. In conclusion, I want to thank you for doing everything you do. The Municipal Arts Society is just essential to the well-being, the future, the beauty of New York. I want to thank you for having me here today, because summits like this bring together great minds, advance our thinking, and help me actually get the ball rolling on the big ideas that become solutions to our toughest challenges. As long as there are groups like you, and as long as we can come together and put together new and creative and interesting ideas, I am sure that New York, the city I was born, raised, and lived my whole life in and love so dearly, will remain the artistic, financial, tourist, and economic capital of the world. Thank you very much.